The Holbein portrait is iconic. The six wives are legendary. The image of the glutton king who broke from Rome for a divorce is burned into our collective memory. But that drama obscures the real, lasting revolution of his reign, a revolution of mechanics, not just monarchy. The six wives make memorable drama. The laws he passed still govern lives. One is entertainment. The other is legacy. Henry VIII didn't set out to create modern Britain, but through a series of audacious, often brutal acts of statecraft, he permanently expanded the power of the government in a way that made the medieval world impossible to resurrect. His reign became the irreversible hinge point, and to understand how, we need to look past the palace intrigue to four pillars of power he either built or fundamentally reforged. The unbreakable chain: church, state, and national identity before Henry VIII. England was, in a crucial sense, a province of Catholic Europe. Its ultimate spiritual authority resided in Rome, and its identity was intertwined with a transnational Christendom. But in 1534, Henry dropped a legal bomb, the Act of Supremacy. With this single piece of legislation, he didn't just argue with the Pope, he replaced him. The act declared the King of England the supreme head on earth of the Church of England. This wasn't primarily about theology. Henry remained a theological conservative who despised Protestant ideas. This was about sovereignty. It was a raw assertion that within the borders of England, no foreign power, not even the Pope, could claim authority. The immediate consequence was profound. National identity became tied directly to the crown. Not to Rome. To be a loyal English subject was now, legally, to acknowledge the king's supremacy over the church. This created the Church of England, an institution that exists to this day. But the long-term legacy is even broader. It established the principle that the British state has a defined religious character, setting the stage for centuries of constitutional conflict and defining the relationship between monarch, government, and national identity. The monarch is still the supreme governor of the Church of England. This foundational separation of England from European religious authority echoes in the complex, often unspoken relationship between faith, monarchy, and what it means to be British. It was the first and most dramatic step in consolidating state power under the crown. The Great Land Grab. Reshaping England's economic DNA, having declared himself head of the church, Henry now went after its wallet. The dissolution of the monasteries between 1536 and 1541 was the largest transfer of land in English history since the Norman conquest. The state first conducted a massive audit, the Valor Ecclesiasticus, to quantify the church's staggering wealth. Then, it seized it. Monasteries were closed, their treasures confiscated by the crown, and their vast estates sold off. But this wasn't just about filling the royal coffers. This was about reshaping the entire social and economic landscape. Land is power, and when it changes hands on this scale, it creates a new ruling class. The old monastic landlords were replaced by a rising gentry class of wealthy landowners, loyal to the crown because the crown had made them wealthy. To secure this new arrangement, Henry passed the Statute of Wills in 1540, which gave these new landowners unprecedented power to dictate how their property was inherited, cementing their families' fortunes for generations. This economic revolution had a devastating human cost. The monasteries weren't just religious houses, they were the backbone of local welfare. They provided alms for the poor, hospice for the sick, and shelter for travelers. Overnight, this entire system of social support evaporated. The state had dismantled the old safety net without providing a new one. This created a crisis of poverty and vagrancy so severe that it forced the state's hand. The government began issuing a series of poor laws, the first hesitant steps toward acknowledging state responsibility for the welfare of its citizens. It was an unintended consequence of the dissolution, by destroying the monastic system. Henry VIII inadvertently created the problem that would, centuries later, necessitate a solution like the NHS. The Great Land Grab didn't just create a new elite, it set the British state on the long, difficult road to becoming a welfare state. The economic DNA of the nation had been permanently altered. The loyalty test, redefining the subject and the state while Henry was reshaping the landscape and the church. It was also redefining the very nature of loyalty. In the medieval world, treason was a personal crime, betrayal of your feudal oath to the king as a person. But Henry's new state needed a different kind of obedience. The Treason Acts of 1534 and 1536 created a terrifying new reality. Now it was treason not only to act against the king, but to simply speak against him, his heirs, or his new titles. You could be executed for denying the royal supremacy, even in a private conversation. This was a profound shift. Loyalty was no longer just personal fealty. It was obedience to the state's official doctrine. The human cost was immediate and brutal. Thomas More, once Henry's close friend and Lord Chancellor, was executed not for plotting, but for maintaining a principled silence. The Nun of Kent, Elizabeth Barton, was executed for prophecies against the king's marriage. Their deaths were a message. The state now claimed authority over belief itself. This created the legal framework for the modern relationship between citizen and state. The idea that disagreement with official policy could be a threat to national security finds a direct, if distant, precursor in Henry's treason laws. He transformed the subject from a vassal with personal obligations into a citizen whose primary duty was to the sovereign state. The stakes of dissent were raised to the highest possible level, establishing a precedent for state power that would echo through the centuries. The parliamentary weapon, king in parliament as a lasting formula. Perhaps Henry's most geniusy and most unintended legacy was his method. He didn't simply impose his will by royal decree. He wielded Parliament as his ultimate weapon. To make his revolutionary changes stick, he needed the cloak of legality and popular consent. So, he ruled not against Parliament, but through it. This created the powerful doctrine of the king in Parliament. Every single one of his seismic shifts, the Act of Supremacy, the acts for the dissolution of the monasteries. The Treason Acts was passed as a statute with the full authority of Parliament. He made Parliament the indispensable source of legal authority for his own power grab. In doing so, he accidentally elevated Parliament to a position it would never relinquish. He established the precedent that the most fundamental changes to the Constitution required parliamentary approval. This precedent created a monster he couldn't ultimately control. By making Parliament the source of supreme law, he planted the seed for the eventual shift of power from the crown to the commons. The absolute monarchy he thought he was building was, in fact, being constructed on a foundation that would one day support a constitutional monarchy. The sovereignty of Parliament, the bedrock of the modern British Constitution, owes its decisive early strengthening to a king who believed he was using Parliament to cement his own personal authority. The accidental architect, Henry VIII, didn't plan modern Britain, solving immediate personal problems, an heir, money, security. But in doing so, he made the medieval world impossible. His reign was the irreversible hinge point. The consequences of his personal dramas, the break with Rome, the land grab, the loyalty tests, the parliamentary gambit, became our institutional realities. He was the accidental architect of the modern British state. If you want history as a Mond, not inherited, subscribe to Time Teller Chronicles. New episodes weekly.